Hi everyone, it's Val here. Welcome back to my channel. As you know, I held a poll and open questionnaire section on my IG, Twitter, and Artstyle before regarding the topic of finding your art style. Before diving into the topic itself, I'd like to thank you all so much for all your feedbacks. I got quite a few responses which I did not expect. Some of them were pretty interesting and a lot of them were honestly so relatable. So the questions I've asked for those of you new here was: first, are you still struggling in finding your art style? Then, do you feel as though finding your art style is stressed too much in your community? Lastly, have you ever felt burnt out because you couldn't seem to find your art style? And overall, it turns out that a lot of you are still struggling in finding your art style and have felt burnt out before. And most of you also found this topic pressured too much in your community. And yes, I've also been there before for the longest time throughout my junior high years, specifically when I started getting more serious in drawing. At that time, I found friends who I can talk to about art and stuffs. Some also became friendly rivals, which was actually a pretty rad time. However, finding an art style was quite a trending topic back then, you could say, and of course it also affected my mindset to make myself unique. But the more I indulged myself into this topic, I started to find it hard to fully enjoy my drawings, and eventually I held back from a lot of my interests for the sake of keeping a particular style I thought was most fitting to my purpose back then. In other words, I was so focused on making myself different that I forgot the essence of drawing itself, which is to simply enjoy it and live it to its fullest. As a result, I was burnt out for more than a year and only got back to drawing seriously again during 10th grade. Okay, so the question goes, how do you find your art style? I'm sure a lot of you have already heard by now how art styles combine naturally is not something you find, and I'm pretty sure most of you are also tired of hearing that because honestly it's quite a broad explanation and it brings up a lot of new questions on how you actually do it. What does naturally actually mean? Practice, but practice how? So I'd like to mark these 3 steps on how to actually find your art style, or if I'd rephrase it better, develop your art style. First, never fixate yourself on the idea of finding an art style. This is a common mistake made by a lot of people, especially beginners, including one I experienced myself back then, and that took a toll out of me. Not only did I become stressed when the art style I wanted did not come out as I imagined it to be, but I became reluctant to try new things. For example, when I started getting more serious posting online, I had this habit where I constantly look back at my feeds and compare it with others. It could be my art friends or other artists out there, and after comparing them with my feeds, I'd always become frustrated because to my eyes, I know every single detail to my drawings, and every little change I notice will be considered another change to my art style. Hence the thought, damn, my art style changed again, or inconsistent art style alert. Furthermore, trying new subjects that may be completely different from my current art style, even though they've always been one of my interests that I've always wanted to try, will become a big no-no because I was so fixated on keeping my artworks the same, or you might say, the same art style. But in reality, you're simply improving, and peeking into those interests are supposedly essential. They'll help you grow and discover the things you really enjoy, those you don't, and the areas you lack in so you can further improve it through practice and experimentations. Another thing that people tend to overshadow when they have this obsession in finding an art style is the importance of realism studies. Now, some of you might think, I don't like realism, I'm not interested in it, realism is so hard, and I want to pursue an anime or cartoony art style anyways. That's totally fine, and I'm not saying that you have to stick yourself completely to realism. In fact, I used to be that person as well, where I thought I'd go anime style all the way, so why should I touch realism? However, without a concrete understanding towards the subject you're trying to convey outwardly through your drawings, it's going to be harder for you to dive into stylization. In other words, it's like telling someone to summarize a whole book without even reading the first page. A strong foundation is important, and comparing myself before and after I've indulged myself into studying real-life objects and subjects, I used to have a very hard time drawing poses, anatomies, and lightings despite all the reference I have, because anime style itself is a simplification of real-life matters, and the same goes for cartoon and other styles out there. As a result, studying an already simplified object will not help you fully understand the subject you're trying to draw as a whole. And you can't learn B before you learn A. That is why it's so important to study what is real first and then stylize your drawings however you want. To summarize the first point, when you fixate yourself to this idea of finding an art style, it's going to blind you from the areas you could have improved, but you didn't because you were so busy looking how to make yourself unique or distinct from others. You're trying so hard to make yourself different, and you toss aside the things you really enjoy and also those you could have learned better. And when it turns out badly or it doesn't live up to your expectations, you become frustrated, stressed, and sometimes unwilling to recover from that state and just give up, which I've seen a lot of my friends do that before. You see people's artworks online and sigh at the pretense that they always do good, which I often get from my friends as well. But hey, you want to know something? Then take a close look at the dump stash behind me. Tons of unfinished whips and archive works. I simply never show them online and only post the ones I consider good enough for people to see. So keep in mind that art style is something you develop throughout your art journey, and it can change throughout the years as you improve. If you somehow decided to try something new and it didn't work out as planned, don't fret, it's completely normal. After all, art's all about the trials and errors, and failure is just a sign that you're growing. Keep trying new things and hone your interests. You'll eventually get there. Moving on to the next step. Identify your idols or art influences and learn from them. Having someone to look up to is a very important step in developing your art style, as you have a clear goal and interest you can pick up on and put into your artworks. One of the practice I would recommend and what you can do is style studies, where you try to study and duplicate other artists' art style. And by doing so, you'll learn the things you've overlooked from mere observation. A lot of times people consider this a taboo, that you're not original, it's plagiarism. But that's not always the case. It's always good to have a clear reference to what you're aiming for. And of course, if you're going to do style studies, please credit the artists. You learn how these artists do their drawings, colorings, and whatever, then apply that into your artworks and hence developing your own art style. However, underline that several artists. By simply having just one artist to look up to will limit the areas of your improvement, and copying down every single aspect of an artist's art style and claiming it yours is an absolute big no, because that's what you call plagiarizing. Ultimately, having several artists involved as your aspirations will help you identify and pick up the things you are interested in and fond of. Although these artists can change over time as you and your tastes develop, in a way, some artists you might have idolized in your early years can eventually look less impressive than you thought they were before, and new artists will replace them. For instance, in my case, back when I was a watercolor artist, I looked up and referenced a lot from Kinney art and Margaret Morel's art. But compared to now, I still love their artworks, and I picked up a lot of things from them, especially Kinney, which I still look up to until today. Really sad when I heard she passed away last year. Rest in peace, Kinney. But anyways, putting that aside, I now have other art gods like Walop, Shaw-E, Guwais, and Nixu, whose artworks inspire me so and influence a lot of my digital art and digital painting skills, starting from skin coloring, textures, hair composition, and eventually creating an entire mood for their pieces. And as you combine and practice the things you got from them along with your interests, you'll eventually develop your own unique art style without you ever needing to find it. Nevertheless, an art style is a mixture of your own personal tastes, influences, and experience. And finally, the last but not least, be patient and enjoy yourself when drawing. I cannot stress enough how important this is, especially when you feel burnt out or displeased of your works. Take a look back at your older arts and see how much you've improved. I, for one, could have never imagined myself with the art style and skill I have now when I was in junior high. And looking back to it from my current standpoint often reminds me again how no matter how dissatisfied you are with your current progress, as long as you try your best and find your interests, your hard work will never fail you. Furthermore, with social media as a widely used platform in this age, oftentimes we look at others seemingly doing better than us and constantly compare ourselves with them, especially with those numbers lying around, which I myself admit that it's not an easy task to completely ignore and turn a blind eye over it. But that'll be a topic for another day. Well, with the many existing art styles out there, we often confuse ourselves to what can make us stand out from them and what art style is best for us, in addition to keeping our feats consistent and uniform in the same art style we hope for. As we pursue these thoughts further, we'll eventually come to this point of burnout. The pressure we and others may perhaps put onto ourselves eventually make us see art differently. That we're no longer able to have fun with it. That is why toxicity is to be avoided by simply being ourselves and freely express the things we want through our works. No matter what good or bad things others may say about yourself, if you yourself don't enjoy it, then I don't see the point of you continuing your art journey. Because art's all about the enjoyment and freedom in expression. What comes to mind and expressed outwardly by an artist reflects them like a mirror. Life is short, so embrace it to its fullest.